Good morning, and thank you for joining INSA's Coffee and Conversation featuring Susan Pollmann. Before we begin, we'd like to share a video from today's sponsor, Maxar. Now, please welcome INSA's Vice President for Policy, Larry Hanauer.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us for Coffee and Conversation. This morning, we're pleased to welcome one of the intelligence community's top leaders to our program. But before we begin, let me make a few housekeeping notes. If you have questions, and we hope you do, please submit them through the questions box on the right-hand side of the screen. We'll do our best to get to all of your questions. We're pleased to welcome members of the press to the call today, so this is a reminder that this program is on the record. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Krischer, Vice President of NGA Programs at Maxar, who will introduce our speaker. Jennifer, over to you.
Thank you, Larry. And thank you, INSA, for hosting this morning's conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. With a deep understanding of the US IC mission and the intense focus on geopolitical priorities and challenges, Maxar has been a trusted partner to the US government for more than 2 decades, providing 90% of the commercial satellite imagery used to create foundational GEOINT. Maxar designs, owns, and operates high-resolution electro-optical satellites and the associated fixed and mobile terminals and the secure data and communications infrastructure to provide comprehensive end-to-end intelligence solutions. Maxar will soon launch its next generation of Earth observation satellites, the WorldView Legion constellation, which will make the company's constellation capable of imaging some areas of the globe up to 15 times per day in 30-centimeter class resolution. As a trusted GEOINT provider in support of national security missions, Maxar is a proud sponsor of this morning's Coffee and Conversations. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker. A lifelong resident of the St. Louis metro area, Sue Pollmann is serving NGA in the dual functions of NGA West Executive and Program Director for the NGA Next West. As the West Executive, she is the NGA Director's point person on the ground at the facilities in St. Louis, ensuring synchronization across all West mission areas, providing representation for the interests of the workforce and interacting on behalf of the agency with the local community. As the program director for N2W, Sue oversees the planning, design, and construction of a new campus in St. Louis to replace the NGA 2nd Street facility. She was first appointed to the senior service in June 2009, serving as the Acquisition West Executive and Group Chief for the Office of Contract Services. Prior to her current assignments, she served as the Director of the Foundation GEOINT Group in the Source Operations Directorate. Welcome, Sue.
Good to be here.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Sue, for joining us this morning. We appreciate your getting up extra early to join us today. So let's start local, as it were, by focusing on NGA's activities in St. Louis, and then we'll get to some broader questions about NGA strategies and capabilities writ large. So as NGA's West Executive and the Program Director for Next NGA West, or N2W, You're the agency's top official, as Jennifer said, at its 3,000-person St. Louis outpost. So you have a key role in the agency's mission and functions across the GEO enterprise. So what are your priorities and your top challenges for 2022?
So thanks for having me, first of all. I'm coming to you from beautiful Building 20 on the 2nd Street campus here in St. Louis today, where it is a snowy, sleety, icky day. So glad to be inside with y'all. So some of you probably aren't familiar with how NGA is organized. We do have our headquarters in Northern Virginia, and then out here in St. Louis, we have between 3,000 and 4,000 people. So you're right. It was mentioned my role as West Executive covers a lot of synchronization activities, and I would say in that particular role and the role as N2W program director kind of dovetails into that nicely. That synchronization is a major priority, and I think for this year and honestly last year too, probably a top priority. And that's because there is so much going on out here in St. Louis in terms of the world of GeoInt. So we here at NGA need to stay plugged into what's going on. We need to take advantage where it's good for us to do so. And it requires a whole lot of communication to stay in sync, to not have our wires crossed, to not duplicate efforts. So that's a real priority for me. We don't want to chase a lot of squirrels. We don't want to plug in, where we shouldn't be plugging in from a legal standpoint. And we can't insert ourselves into every good idea that's going on out here, every great activity. So to that end, we stood up actually a few years ago when we saw this momentum building around setting up St. Louis as a kind of a geospatial hub, global geospatial hub. We set up an organization internally, St. Louis Area Geospatial Ecosystem. It's an internal, I'll call it a committee of folks from across the enterprise who have interests in all of these various activities, whether it's technology, workforce development, whatever. And we get together regularly. There's leadership for this team. And really that is about ensuring we're taking advantage of what's going on, but we're not getting wires crossed and we're not duplicating efforts or going after things that really shouldn't be a focus area for us. And believe me, that's easy to do when there's as much going on as is happening here in St. Louis now. So, we look at what's happening and we just make sure we're plugging in where that brings advantage to the NGA mission. And a lot of that is in terms of technology and STEM and the workforce, which I think we'll probably get a chance to talk about later. But yeah, I see that as a big challenge and a big priority kind of all rolled into one.
Sure. So many of us, I think, would like to get outside the Beltway from time to time. Of course, you're there permanently. So what are the unique challenges that face government and industry working in St. Louis, and how do they differ from the dynamics inside the Beltway?
Yeah, so that's great. I always like to say, and my predecessor, Brett Markham, said the same thing, West is best. We love to tout that throughout NGA. So in terms of challenges, I would say there's not a lot of difference between working here and working within the Beltway, but there's trade-offs, right? So there's the kind of the pros and cons. In many ways here, for instance, the opportunities can really be greater to engage at the working level. I've noticed there's a bit of a dynamic in the Beltway that interactions need to be at the senior level, and here in the Midwest, that's a bit different. So that's a good thing, I think, particularly in terms of our folks really being able to engage and see what's going on. On the flip side, I would say industry that is based out here may feel like they have less access with decision makers. And that, again, that's just just a natural thing. But again, there's the trade-offs, and there's a lot of goodness that comes from being here. You know, we often say away from the flagpole. We're not really away from the flagpole. We are, you know, a part of headquarters, but it's just easier. It's easier to operate in some respects. The other advantage we have here in the Midwest is that when we hire and train people, we have a lot of opportunity to retain them, and that's just the dynamic of kind of going it alone as an intel agency in St. Louis, right? There just isn't a lot of our kind of work around here, so that works out well for us from a retention standpoint, and you know, we really appreciate that, and certainly all of the work now going on in terms of the geospatial ecosystem out here only helps us access talent in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So you also, as we mentioned, are the director of the Next NGA West project. So let's discuss the details of N2W, which is really a groundbreaking new facility that should change the agency's capabilities and activities. So let's start with the big picture. What's the vision for the N2W campus, and how does the project engage industry and academia as partners?
Okay, so first of all, let me tell you, N2W, the funnest job ever. So we codified objectives. Actually, I'll use the term way back. When Director Cardilla was still here, he had some very clear director's intent for us, and the team took that to heart. And I will tell you, those objectives have stayed very constant. We put those in place back in 2016, 2017, when we were working on our initial design, and they've stayed true. So in a nutshell, we've been charged with building a facility that maximizes collaboration. And by that, we mean collaboration with not just our traditional cleared partners, but non-traditional partners who in the past we haven't been able to really deal with because of lack of clearances. We were charged to build a facility that was as flexible as possible, that would bring efficiencies to our mission, but at the same time being secure. So that's, right, you know, a bit of a tough challenge and balance. Obviously, we wanted to build a beautiful and productive space for our workforce. And then the other piece is building a facility. We say we're building for the next 100 years. The buildings we're in today on the 2nd Street Old Arsenal are over 100 years old. So we wanted sustainable, energy efficient, open spaces that we can maintain well for decades to come. So those were our primary framework around which we built the facility.
Great. It's amazing when the Arsenal building was built 100 years ago, geospatial intelligence consisted of cameras on hot air balloons, right? And here we are today, and we can wonder what it'll be 100 years from now. So let me ask a little bit about the unclassified work, because you mentioned partnering with non-traditional partners who may not be cleared. So how will doing more unclassified work at N2W change the way that the agency as a whole performs its mission and uses the workforce? And also, will it take on new missions that are unclassified, such as supporting civil authorities in disaster response, or maybe contributing to a better understanding of how climate change affects U.S. national security?
Right. So a lot in that question. First of all, what N2W brings to the table is a purpose-built facility meant to do unclassified as well as classified work, meant to allow us to flex into the future. So that brings some advantages that we can't currently use in some of our other facilities, even the NCE, which NCE is only 10 years old, right? So the unclassified piece involves setting up specific spaces dedicated to unclassified work, but not just the spaces. The spaces are important because you put certain security features in place so that you can, for instance, use wireless and still keep your secure data secure. But a big part of it is the work that our friends in CIOT, our technology group, are doing to move production systems to the unclassified environment. So we'll have a building that can accommodate unclassified work right next to classified, but then we will also have the production systems that are already being morphed to be able to do unclassified data development in an unclassified environment from the get-go. So what does that mean? That means efficiency, first and foremost. Today, some of those data production processes occur, even though it's unclassified information, occur in a SCIF on a high-side computer, a high-side system. Then that data has to be moved to the low side to then be delivered to our customers who, oh, by the way, don't have SCI clearances.
Right.
And so you gain that efficiency. You no longer have to do the back and forth of the data from one domain to another. You also gain, and this is where I think is a huge game changer, you gain that ability to bring those very customers in to work directly with you side by side, virtually, because you're operating, everything's hosted in an unclassified world, and they can be right there with you. So just think about that a little bit. You know, how many times today do we maybe produce a product, then we send it to a customer, then they bleed all over it and say, no, that's not really what I needed. It doesn't do what I need. And then, you know, back it comes to be reworked. Now we can actually sit directly with those folks. We can have them in the space or work with them virtually. So those are huge,
Right.
huge increases in what we can do. And in terms of, you know, you talked a little bit about some of those unclassified missions, climate change, disaster support. You know, we're doing a lot of that today. That's as long as I've been with NGA, that's always been a part of our mission, and it happens. But it's still that same paradigm of building
Right.
products high, moving them low, getting them out. So all of that just becomes more productive, I think, in a facility that's built to handle that.
Right. And so it sounds like, given that the agency issued a commercial GeoInt strategy last December that emphasized the use and the acquisition of commercial information, that the N2W campus will really enable the agency to incorporate commercial GeoInt into its analysis much more effectively.
More effectively, exactly. It's all incorporated today, but you're right. The effectiveness is the piece that I think is the game changer for us, just to make it all work together much more seamlessly than it does today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and probably more responsively if you're able to do things all on the low side rather than have to keep moving things back
Yeah.
and forth.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. So let me ask a question about the Moonshot Initiative that NGA announced last year, which is designed to position the United States to win a great power GeoInt arms race, principally by promoting innovation and speeding development time. So how will NGA's St. Louis-based Moonshot Labs advance these strategic goals?
So Moonshot Labs is, first of all, it's kind of a bridge to N2W. So
Okay.
it was built out and set up because N2W is going to be built with an unclassified innovation lab, with an unclassified learning center, all a part of that objective of allowing for collaboration in the new facility. Moonshot Labs came about as a means to say, well, let's not wait till 2025 when we move into N2W to take advantage of those kinds of opportunities and activities. Let's do it now. So there's a lot going on at Moonshot Labs, and there's a lot of advantages there. There's kind of two I'd like to focus on in this conversation, and that is in terms of tech transfer, we can use Moonshot Labs because it's an unclassified space, very easy for, again, those non-traditional partners to come in and out, to sit down with our analysts. Our analysts can go over there. It's right in downtown St. Louis. You know, it's about 2 miles down the road, very easy to get to for our folks. So our folks can go in there, can sit down and work directly with might be universities, researchers, it might be new startups. It's actually, Moonshot Labs is located in a building that is set up and chartered to support startups. So that works out very well for us. But it gives us the opportunity to kind of kick the tires on technology, work some of these tech transfer efforts, bring people in. You may have heard about our accelerator efforts. We're in the 3rd cohort now. That's been really successful. So we bring these small companies in. We help them understand our specific mission gaps. We see what they have to offer, and then we can do things even like help them learn how to compete in the federal space, and find opportunities to take things we need and even develop that technology further, maybe for commercial applications downstream and into the future. So that's a big piece of what Moonshot Labs is set up to do. Secondly is workforce development. So that's near and dear to my heart, you know, the workforce of the future. We're building this beautiful place. We need the people, you know, that will come in there and work. So Moonshot Labs has given us these great opportunities, again, to bring in students of all ages, and there's a whole lot going on out here in St. Louis in terms of what I mentioned previously, reaching folks who in the past wouldn't have thought of us as a career.
Right.
But we can bring the students in, we can bring professors in, we can do mentoring, we can take advantage of other local mentoring activities that are going on. You know, again, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we can kind of glom on to what's happening and really partner with some of these organizations that are doing some great work. So the STEM activities in Moonshot Labs is another big piece of, I think, what we're trying to achieve with that space. And again, N2W comes online in 2025. We've got an unclassed innovation lab there, and we've got an unclassed learning center to really continue going after those things, but right on site. Yeah.
That's great. So now, since you've mentioned that there's opportunities at Moonshot Labs and then at N2W to do unclassified work, principally through partners, through students, through all these innovative companies, will the agency also begin to hire government employees who have yet to get their clearances and let them start working in these unclassified facilities while they presumably wait for their clearance to come through, and then they can move on to other missions?
Right. Yeah, that's certainly an opportunity. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much we'll actually do that. I'll tell you from a practical standpoint what I've seen, because we can do that a bit today because of Moonshot Labs and also because of the space I'm sitting in right now, Building 20 here on 2nd Street's campus is unclassified space. So we can do it a bit. But what we have found is, first of all, we do need all of our employees to have a clearance, have an SCI clearance, and because of the conditional nature of employment, you know, many people really would prefer to get that clearance before they come in the door. So that's just a practical matter. But to your point, we can do that, you know, so we can bring people in, potentially, depending on their work role, could bring them in, say, for a couple of months while they are waiting for their clearance. And in some cases that might work out. So it does present that opportunity.
Right, and it might give an opportunity to offer someone a position and sort of grab them and get them to work so that they don't get disillusioned with the clearance process and go find a job somewhere else in the meantime.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. Let me ask one other question about the technology at N2W. You mentioned that it enables, the unclassified facility will enable you to use things like secure wireless. And I think the IT strategy also includes an all cloud-based zero client computing approach. So how will these kinds of technologies change the way in which agency staff do business, either in St. Louis or in Washington or elsewhere?
Yeah, so So I'm not techie, but I'll give you the Sue Pollmann, kind of high level what I see from this. So wireless is huge. We plan to have wireless access both in the unclassified and then secure wireless within the SCIF. Obviously, those are kind of two different separate beasts. But what wireless brings to the table is, first of all, in the unclass area, similar to Moonshot Labs today, a partner can bring in their wireless device, log in, show us what they've got to show us, and it's much easier to share and collaborate and do that kind of partnering. So that's one piece of the equation. It also allows, though, in terms of the entire facility and the workspaces, even in the SCIF potentially, or people can use mobile devices. We think that's huge in terms of, again, this efficiency piece. So if our employees today, if they go to a meeting in a conference room, they take notes on a piece of paper, and that's about it. They go back to their desk, they try to reproduce what they heard in their system somewhere. So obviously, if we have mobile devices, our employees can go from desk to desk. They can go from meeting to meeting. They can easily share information. Their information can be plugged in, thrown up on a screen. All of those things that in the commercial world everybody takes for granted, but we can't do. So that's big. An employee can also, go from their desk in the module to, say, a quiet space somewhere, and again, their work just simply goes with them. So that's a big deal. On the zero client side, again, it's efficiency, but in this case, again, in my vernacular, zero client gives us the ability to have the data where we need the data. It should eliminate a lot of the problems we have today. For instance, just how long it takes for a data set to download, to be used in developing a product. Again, because we can potentially have our unclassified administrative type of data in an unclassed cloud somewhere. We can have data that doesn't need to be right on premise in a secure cloud or in one of our data centers, but then we will have the ability to have data that needs to be on premise. We'll have it on premise. And then the zero client device just sucks the data in from, its home location that's invisible to the user. So that's a huge, again, I think it eliminates a lot of aggravation. That's what we're seeing in our testing, and should make our analysts and all of our folks more efficient in their day-to-day.
Good. As long as we're talking about data, let me work in an audience question here that we've gotten from Derek Claiborne with Chain Analysis, who asks, how is NGA working to integrate unique and disparate data sets into its mission?
So part of that, I'll say is, again, in the unclass world, the commercial world, I think that's where we're finding a lot of that uniqueness. I will say it's a challenge because there is so much out there available to us. So we do have to figure out how to understand the art of the possible, understand what's available to us, and then figure out what to take advantage of. But we are, again, as I mentioned earlier, we're building more of our production efforts to be able to more seamlessly pull in some of those really unique sorts of data that are out there, do that in an unclassified environment. Oftentimes that information then gets pushed into the classified environment to be used in those types of products also. But as we delve more and more into that ability to produce on the low side, it really helps us take advantage, I think, of more of what's out there.
Yeah. All right, so we've now talked a lot about the vision for N2W. So let's talk about how NGA West approaches agency-wide and IC-wide challenges and how the N2W initiative may enhance capabilities. So in April, INSA will hold a full-day conference on artificial intelligence and data. So I'd like to ask a few questions about how NGA uses AI to make sense of its data holdings. So about a year ago, NGA Deputy Director Stacy Dixon said that great power competition is challenging NGA to provide faster and better products and services. And she said NGA wants to expand its supplier base to entrepreneurs and academics in order to speed up innovation. So have you seen improvements in this area in the past year since Stacy made those comments? And have you seen improvements in particular in applications for artificial intelligence?
Yeah, and I have seen improvements, and I think normally in a role like mine, I might not have visibility into all of that, but what I'm seeing again is because of this geospatial ecosystem development out here in St. Louis, a lot of those types of opportunities and connections are popping up out here. So I do get some exposure to them. So again, because of a lot of hard work, I'm seeing more and more of, for instance, we've got these partnership intermediary agreements. That was a thing that was unknown to me a few years ago. But we set up our first one a couple of years ago, again, to handle these accelerator efforts and the cohorts that are coming through. A lot of that cohort activity is really focused in the AI area. And I think we're getting the opportunity then to take advantage of maybe what would have been untapped capabilities prior to this ecosystem thing floating up. We also are using educational partnership agreements, and we've got a number of those with local universities. The universities are, just a huge resource in this area. So that's been big. And then agreements even with universities that are, have big compute power and can really also help us try out and move forward in some of the AI areas. So I'm seeing just a lot more of those other types of agreements that allow companies with capabilities to get their foot in the door, or universities to get their foot in the door. And then from there, where these capabilities have application to what we're doing and are a good investment, then we can take them further. So the biggie to me is just using these different types of agreements, the CRADAs. We've had CRADAs historically, but we've really also expanded those further. And all of that is just giving us access to and visibility into processes and capabilities we might not otherwise have known about.
Right. So I'm glad you mentioned the getting companies in the door, because the government's acquisition process is just so complex and lengthy, and it drives off a number of small companies that would prefer to work with commercial customers where they don't have the same security requirements and contracting requirements and lengthy acquisition cycles. So how is NGA working to improve its procurement mechanisms so it's able to acquire the innovative private sector technologies that you've been talking about and then apply them to the critical intelligence problems that you're addressing?
Okay, so I guess the first thing, I'll use this as an opportunity to foot stomp. This is a Sue Pollmann thing, but a big part of getting to the capabilities we need and improving that acquisition process is about communication, honestly. What I've seen, and I spent 30 years plus in contracting and acquisition, we NGA don't do ourselves any favors by, again, failing to get across what we need. And oftentimes, in my experience, what I've seen is, we can have the fastest, greatest acquisition method, but in the end, if the outcome isn't well defined and we don't get what we actually need, we've wasted a whole lot of time. So just a little soapbox here for ensuring that both industry and the government do their part to clearly communicate up front. We need to share what we want to achieve. We need industry's good ideas. We need industry to not be reticent about telling us we're all wet on something, right? Telling us in a very forthright manner, you're not going to get what you need. I think in terms of small businesses and some of these very explicit technology areas, small businesses can be very concerned about, well, can I speak frankly, right? No, we need everyone to be very frank. We have to do our part. We have to do things like, have very specific focused forums to really talk through what we want and what we need. So that's our piece of it. And then to actually listen is our piece of it too. Yep. But we do need everybody in industry to be very clear with us. Now, that said, there's a lot of new opportunities in terms of streamlining, and these opportunities are particularly good for allowing us to kick the tires on certain applications that we might be able to make use of. So the SBIRs, the SBIRs, that's a big one that NGA has really, in the last couple of years, really taken advantage of. I think we did something like over 50 of them last year. Wow. And that's a great way, again, for small businesses to get their ideas in the door, allow us to try it out, and then, kind of prepare them for further contracting. We have the other transaction authorities that we utilize. The other thing that we're trying, I've talked to my friends back in contracts about this, that they are trying to use more of are these down select processes. So that's, they officially call them advisory down selects. But in a situation where we're maybe going to do a competition and we see that there's going to be a lot of competition, a lot of companies, and we know how much for industry it costs to put together these very complex proposals. Yeah. We tend to be pretty demanding on that. The advisory down selects allow us to get some initial proposals in, kind of lower key, less complex, and then we can go back to industry and say, okay, yes, you are set up to compete well on this, or no, you're not, and we would probably advise you not to proceed. And then it is still up to the companies to take that advice and decide what they want to do. So we're kind of just starting down that path, but I think that will help too. But I'll just give you my honest opinion. All of these wonderful processes and ways of doing things aside, bottom line is everything goes faster and better if we're actually working together from the time we're defining a requirement to when we get it on contract and after that.
Yeah. In the time we have left, let me ask a few questions about workforce, because you alluded earlier to the high quality workforce that you have in St. Louis and the agency's ability to retain people with experience and expertise, which is great. And with STEM skills in increasingly high demand and COVID driving changes in the work environment, agencies have and companies as well have significant related challenges. So one thing that comes up really is data literacy. So as a high-tech agency reliant on a highly trained workforce, NGA is committed to bolstering data literacy among its employees. What steps has the agency taken to ensure that people who are already working for the agency receive continual training and education so that they can remain at the top of their fields? Because if you're retaining people for a long period of time, which is terrific, you want to make sure that their skills aren't getting stale.
Right. Yeah. So very good point. And we've certainly seen, this kind of huge metamorphosis, particularly on the analytical side of the skills that are needed, to stay sharp and be ready and deal with all of this data. Again, from my perch, I'm seeing, first of all, COVID was actually kind of an advantage in some respects because it did give us some time, and it was a bit of a forcing function to bring in a lot more internal training, online training, virtual training that people can take advantage of in a telework environment and really improve their skills and again, their data literacy, their coding skills, et cetera. Yep. So that's been huge. The internal formal training has increased. Our NGA college has really been on top of that piece of the puzzle. And then the other thing are these educational partnership agreements and CRADAs with local universities. So that's given us the opportunity to partner with the universities so the universities can, where maybe we're not able to or don't have the bandwidth internally to offer some of this developmental training and education, we're able to pursue that for our employees through agreements with local universities. So that those things all working together really have done a lot, I think, for our employee base. I know when I sit in, for instance, our daily ops intel meetings, many days we get briefings from our employees, new products they're developing, new processes, new capabilities. It is quite clear that employees are taking advantage, are learning this stuff, and are gaining a whole lot of capabilities that a few years ago we didn't have. And that's really, it's uplifting to see that, and it bodes well for our future security.
Yeah. No, that's great. Let me take a couple of audience questions in the time we have left. We've got a question from Betsy Miso, who asks, given C2E, what is N2W doing regarding hybrid, multi-cloud, and cloud agnostic technology investments?
Okay, now you're going down a path outside my comfort zone, but okay. I will say N2W plans to take advantage of C2E. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that whole zero client solution relies on putting the data where the data needs to be, and we see some real opportunities in terms of that hybrid cloud environment. So we continue to kind of kick the tires on that to do the testing. In fact, that testing goes on right here in Building 20. That testing's given us the opportunity to get a good handle on, I think, what works, what doesn't work. And so now we just need to work further with our friends in our CIOT organization to hammer out what that final solution is going to look like. But certainly hybrid multi-cloud is high on our list of priorities for N2W.
Yeah, great. We've got a question here from Stephen Levine, who wants to go back to the conversation about Moonshot Labs. Do you have any particular success stories that you can share with us?
So I think part of one big success I've seen already, and again, this gets into the workforce development piece and our partnerships with industry and our partnerships with academia in terms of workforce development. So what you see is you see Moonshot Labs at the T-Rex in St. Louis, and you see other things happening at the T-Rex in St. Louis now, because of N2W and I think because of Moonshot Labs. So Harris-Stowe State University, which is a local state, historically black college and university, has their Geo Hornet lab right next door to Moonshot Labs. NGA, in turn, has set up a adjunct professor position to work directly with Harris-Stowe. So Harris-Stowe, as they build a GIS program, a GeoInt program for their students, NGA can be right next door to them and work together with them in that regard as they bring their students into the T-Rex, into their lab. So that's a success story. Also, another great example right there in the T-Rex is Leidos. So Leidos has a great mentoring program that they've stood up. Again, we've got that proximity. They're right there with us. We can hear about what they're doing. We can interact with the students that they are mentoring. So those pieces have been huge. Yeah. And then the Accelerator Cohorts, again, we're on Cohort 3. I don't have any specific examples today of any one of the, I guess we'd call them the winners in those cohorts, any of their technologies specifically being put under contract yet. But yet, Moonshot Labs has allowed us to work directly with those cohorts. They all do their demos, and then we can sit down and very easily work with them to advance what they're trying to do that we see as a benefit for NGA. If we were just operating here at 2nd Street, that would not happen. Right. It's just too hard over here. So those are some initial outcomes, but I'm really looking forward to the day when we can specifically point to, say, a tech transfer that's been successful, that's come out of one of those cohorts, and hopefully multiple.
That would be great. Well, let me end with one last question, brings us back to some current events. Jetta Breslow asks, how does NGA St. Louis play in collection and analysis regarding Russia and Ukraine?
We play a lot. I probably can't get into too many details, but certainly there's a good chunk of the NGA team working that very hard problem here in St. Louis. And, you know, that's one wonderful thing about the scope of what NGA does in St. Louis. Just from a continuity of operations perspective, you know, we duplicate just about every NGA mission has some level of footprint out here in St. Louis. So that's a big deal. And that, you know, that aspect of how NGA operates goes all the way back to when General Clapper was our director, back after the 9/11 times, and he saw that that was potentially a great advantage for NGA in the future to take advantage of this footprint out here in St. Louis.
Yep.
And we've since built the agency's capabilities that way. And so, yeah, we can lift and shift and do what we need to do to support national security, which is a great advantage, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. And so thank you to all of the NGA staff who are working on the current events that are unfolding, and to other missions as well that affect national security. That is all the time we have this morning. Sue, thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing your insights about what's going on in St. Louis and NGA West's role in the GEOINT enterprise. We really appreciate your taking the time with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Right. So to all of you who have joined us, thank you for taking part and for your thoughtful questions. Once again, thank you to Maxar for supporting today's program, and thanks to everyone. When the webinar ends, a short survey will pop up on your screen. Please take a moment to complete it and let us know how we did. So looking ahead, next week on Thursday, March 3rd, we'll host our next installment of Coffee and Conversation with NRO Principal Deputy Director Troy Menk. Dr. Menk will provide insights into NRO's challenges and priorities, including engagement with commercial space partners, development of critical satellite systems, and cyber resiliency of space assets. On Thursday, March 15th, we'll hold an online leadership luncheon with NGA Director Vice Admiral Robert Sharp. Admiral Sharp will retire soon, and we're pleased to be able to hold this virtual celebration to honor his distinguished career. Former Principal Deputy DNI Sue Gordon will moderate a lively discussion with Admiral Sharp. And finally, on May 14th, we'll hold our annual William Oliver Baker Award Dinner. This year, we'll honor the first Secretary of Homeland Security, Governor Tom Ridge. Details on all these events can be found on the INSA website at insaonline.org. This concludes this morning's program. Thank you for joining us.